Outside was coming down so hard I couldn't see the porch light anymore, just a yellow smudge in all that white, and my husband had his hand wrapped around the back of my neck like a leash. He was telling me what I was. The words don't matter now. What mattered then was the angle of his fingers and the way my daughter, my 5-year-old, was sitting on the kitchen floor with her knees pulled up to her chin watching. She had her stuffed otter pressed against her mouth. I remember thinking, please don't let her remember this. Please let her be too young. And then I felt the bone in my forearm snap against the edge of the counter, and I knew she was going to remember everything. My name is Holland. I was 31 years old that Christmas Eve. I worked as a pediatric dental hygienist in a clinic off Route 7 in a small town in Vermont, where the population sign still listed a number from the 90s. My husband was a regional manager for a chain of auto parts stores. We had been together for 9 years and married for 6, and I had spent the last 3 of those years building a private map inside my head of which floors creaked, which doors locked from the inside, and how much wine he could drink before the version of him I had married disappeared entirely. People always ask, in that careful voice, why women stay. I'm going to tell you something true. You don't stay because you're stupid. You stay because the first time it happens, he cries harder than you do. You stay because the second time you've already lied to your mother about the bruise, and walking it back feels like admitting something worse than the bruise itself. You stay because your daughter calls him daddy and her whole face lights up when he comes home, and you cannot reconcile the man who pushes a stuffed dinosaur across the rug, making it roar, with the man who held you down by your hair on the bathroom tile 2 nights ago. You stay because nobody warned you it would be like trying to leave a religion. I want to back up. A year before that Christmas Eve, my father called me on a Tuesday morning while I was driving to work. My father is a man named Pete, who retired from the state police after 28 years. He raised me alone after my mother died of an aneurysm when I was 11. And he's the kind of father who still keeps a coupon for my favorite cereal in his wallet because he saw it in the Sunday paper and meant to give it to me. He called me that Tuesday and he said, "Holland, I need you to drive somewhere quiet and pull over." I pulled into the parking lot of a closed antique store. There was frost on the windshield, and the wipers had left 2 clean half-moons. He said, "I want to ask you something, and I want you to know that whatever you answer, I will never repeat. Not to anyone." I said, "Okay." He said, "Is he hitting you?" I cannot explain to you what happened in my chest. It was as if a door I had been pushing my whole weight against for 2 years just swung open on its own. I started crying in a way I hadn't let myself cry. Not even alone in the shower with the water turned up. My father didn't say anything. He just stayed on the line. He let me cry until I could breathe again, and then he said very quietly, "Okay, here's what we're going to do." He didn't tell me to leave. That's the thing nobody understands about him. He knew that if he said leave, I would panic and lie and pull away, and he would lose me. He said instead, "I want you to teach my granddaughter something. I want you to make it a game." That weekend, my dad came over with a small flip phone, the kind you buy at a gas station, already activated. He pulled my daughter into his lap on the couch, and he said, "Cricket, your old grandpa is getting forgetful. I need a special helper who can remember a phone number for me. Do you think you can be that helper?" My daughter, who was 4 years old at the time and whose real name is Posy, but who my father has called Cricket since the day she was born because she chirped instead of cried, sat up very straight on his knee. She told him she would be the best helper in the entire world. He taught her his cell phone number. He turned it into a song. He drilled her on it gently, casually, in the way grandfathers drill little girls on songs over months. He hid the flip phone inside an old wooden jewelry box that had belonged to my mother, the one I kept on the top shelf of Posy's closet behind her winter sweaters. He showed her how to open it. He showed her how to hold the green button down to make it call. He told her this was a secret between him and her and Mommy, and that one day if Mommy ever looked very sad or very hurt, she should go get the special phone and call him, and he would come. She thought it was a wonderful game. She used to whisper the song to herself in the bathtub. I want you to understand that my father did this because he had spent 28 years on the state police, and he knew what happened in homes like mine on holidays. He didn't tell me to leave because he knew I wasn't ready. He gave me a 5-year-old emergency call button instead, and he prayed I'd never need it. The Christmas Eve I'm telling you about started ordinary. I had worked a half day at the clinic and stopped at the grocery store on the way home for the kind of supermarket brie my husband liked, and a bag of clementines. I remember the clementines specifically. I remember the bag was orange mesh, and I was thinking about whether Posy would eat one before bed. That is what was in my head, not what was about to happen. Clementines. My husband's car was already in the driveway when I got home, which was the first thing wrong, because he had told me he wouldn't be back from the regional office party until 7. The second thing wrong was that the front door was unlocked, but the storm door was latched from the inside, which meant he'd come in fast and angry and hadn't bothered to do it on purpose. The third thing wrong was the smell, which was bourbon. The brown bottle one. The bottle his father had given him, and that he only opened when he was already past the point where talking would help. Posy was at the kitchen table coloring. She had a green crayon in her left hand, and she had drawn a Christmas tree with so many ornaments it looked like a disease. She didn't look up when I came in. She had learned not to look up. He was standing at the kitchen island with his phone face down on the granite. He said, "Where have you been?" I said, "The grocery store." I held up the bag. He said, "Whose car was that?" I said, "What car?" He said, "There was a car. Out front. When I got home." Whose was it? There hadn't been a car. There is never a car. There is never a man. There is never a phone call from a number I won't explain. He invents them because he needs to. Because if I'm the reason he's angry, then he isn't, if you follow me. Most of the fights of my marriage have been with a woman I have never met, a woman who exists only in my husband's mouth. I put the groceries on the counter. I said, very calmly, the way I had learned to talk to him in the last 2 years, the way you talk to a horse, that there was no car, that I had been at Hannaford, that the receipt was in the bag and the time was on the receipt. He picked up the receipt. He looked at it. He crumpled it up and dropped it on the floor. He said, "You think I'm stupid." That was when I knew the night was going to be bad. Not because he said it. Because of how quietly he said it. I looked at Posy. Posy was still coloring. She had switched from green to red, and she was pressing so hard the crayon was breaking. I crouched down next to her chair and I said, "Cricket, why didn't you go upstairs and pick out your pajamas? The Christmas ones with the polar bears." She looked up at me. She looked from me to her father and back to me. And I want to tell you that what I saw in her face was a kind of comprehension that no 5-year-old should ever have. The kind that takes years off a child's life. I touched her cheek. I said, "Mommy will be up in a little bit." She slid down off the chair and she walked very slowly to the stairs. And she went up. I have replayed that moment 1,000 times. I keep thinking, if I had said one more thing, if I had said, "Get the otter," if I had said, "Get the jewelry box," but I didn't, because part of me still thought, the part of me that had been a regular wife for 9 years, the part of me that planned vacations and folded laundry and rotated the tires, that part of me still believed we were going to argue and he was going to slam a door and we were going to go to bed angry, the way normal couples do. He waited until he heard her bedroom door close. Then he asked me again whose car it was. I said again that there had been no car. He grabbed me by the hair at the back of my head. I'm going to skip what happened next. I'm going to skip it because the comments on every video that's ever been made about a woman like me are full of people who want to know the details, and the details are not for them. The details are mine and my doctors and the prosecutors. What you need to know is that he broke the radius bone in my right forearm against the lip of the kitchen counter when I tried to brace myself. And you could hear it. You could hear the snap. And the pain was the kind of pain that takes your vision down to a tunnel. What you need to know is that he was not finished. What you need to know is that I went down on my knees on the kitchen floor and I could not breathe. And I was trying to count the cabinet handles to keep myself conscious because some part of me, some part trained by 28 years of being Pete's daughter, was already thinking, you need to stay alive. You need to stay alive for the next 10 minutes. And then I heard from the top of the stairs a small, calm voice say, "Grandpa, Mommy is on the floor and her arm is the wrong shape and please come fast." He stopped. He stopped because he heard her too. He went very still and he said, "What did you just say?" I lifted my head. Posy was standing on the top step with the little flip phone pressed against her ear with both hands, the way she had been taught, and she was looking down at her father with no expression at all on her face. She had remembered the song, she had remembered the jewelry box. She had remembered all of it. She said into the phone, "He has the brown bottle. Yes, yes, okay." My husband started up the stairs. I have never moved faster in my life than I did in that moment, with a broken arm on a kitchen floor in my socks. I do not know how I got up. I got up. I got between him and the staircase and I said his name, and I said it the way I had never said it in our entire marriage, which is to say I said it like I meant it as a warning instead of a plea. He turned around. He came back down the stairs. He came toward me. The next thing that happened was the front door. You have to understand how loud my father's department-issued boot was on a hollow core door in a quiet Vermont house at 6:30 on Christmas Eve. He'd been retired for 2 years, and he had not had occasion to kick a door in all of his 28 years on the force, because he was a state trooper and not a SWAT officer. But he had clearly been thinking about how to do it for a while. The frame splintered. The deadbolt came out of the wood with a piece of the jamb still attached. Cold air rushed into the house carrying the smell of snow and gasoline. My father was not alone. Behind him was a sheriff's deputy named Hannigan, who'd gone to high school with him, and behind Hannigan was a paramedic, and behind the paramedic was a woman from the County Victim Services Office, whose name I would not learn until later. My father had not driven over alone. My father had not driven over to handle this himself. My father had spent a year preparing for the phone call he had just received from his granddaughter, and he had made sure that when it came, he would arrive with paperwork and witnesses. This is what 28 years on the state police gets you. It gets you a plan. My husband saw them and his entire face changed. I had seen his face change 100 times over our marriage, from public to private, from charming to ugly, but I had never seen the face he made then, which was the face of a man who has just realized that the version of his life he has been telling himself is not the version everyone else has been watching. He said, Pete, listen, this isn't what it looks like." My father did not look at him. My father walked past him as if he were a piece of furniture, and he came to me on the kitchen floor, and he knelt down and he put his hand on my cheek, the way he had when I was 11 and my mother was in the hospital. He said, "Hi, sweetheart, the paramedic is right behind me. You're okay. You're okay now." Behind him, Deputy Hannigan was already reading my husband his rights. I want to tell you what happened next because I know from the comments on stories like mine that people need the rest of it. They need to know that the law worked. They need to know that the law worked. They need to know there was a consequence. So here it is. My husband was charged that night with aggravated domestic assault, which in Vermont is a felony when there's serious bodily injury, and serious bodily injury is what a broken radius bone counts as. He spent Christmas Eve in the county jail. He spent Christmas Day there too. He was arraigned the day after Christmas and bail was set at an amount his parents could not immediately make, which gave us 72 hours to file for a relief from abuse order, which my father had already drafted. Because my father is the kind of man who drafts things, the order kept my husband out of our house, off our street, and away from Posy's preschool. It was extended at the hearing 2 weeks later. It became permanent 4 months after that. The criminal case took 14 months. He pled out in the end to felony assault with a domestic enhancement, and he is currently serving 32 months at a state correctional facility 2 hours north of here. He will be on the registry the rest of his life. I get a letter every 6 months from the Department of Corrections telling me his status. The civil divorce was simpler than the criminal case because my father had also, over that same year, quietly photographed the bruises on my back and my ribs, the ones I'd been telling people were from slipping on the basement stairs. He had time-stamped them. He had kept them in a manila folder in his safe. I didn't know about the folder until the lawyer asked me if I had any documentary evidence of a pattern, and my father slid the folder across the table without a word. I cried. The lawyer didn't. I want to talk about the part nobody talks about, which is what came after. After, I had to relearn things. I had to relearn how to sleep in a bed. Alone, which sounds simple and is not. I had to relearn how to flinch less when a man laughed too loud in a restaurant. I had to relearn how to spend money without first asking somebody if it was okay, which meant the first time I bought a $40 pair of jeans by myself. I sat in the parking lot of the store afterward and shook. I had to relearn how to be Posy's only parent, which was the hardest part because she missed him. She missed the version of him that pushed dinosaurs across the rug. And she did not understand for a long time why the man who did that and the man who hurt Mommy were the same man. She was in play therapy for 2 years. She's 7 now. She's in first grade. She has a stuffed otter that is older than she is, and she has a flip phone in a wooden jewelry box on the top shelf of her closet, even though her grandfather lives with us full-time now, and she would only have to walk across the hall to reach him. She likes that the phone is there. I do too. I went back to work 9 weeks after the cast came off. I am still at the pediatric dental clinic off Route 7. I bought my husband out of the house with money my father loaned me at 0 interest and a payment plan I am still chipping away at. I have not dated. I'm not sure I will. People tell me I'm young and there's time, and I know they mean well. And I also know that the inside of my chest is still a construction site, and I'm not letting anyone in there with their shoes on yet. Here is what I want to say, and then I'm done. If you are listening to this in a parking lot because you cannot listen to it in the house, I see you. If you are listening to this with one earbud in while you fold his laundry, I see you. If your daughter has stopped looking up when you walk into the kitchen, I see her. You do not have to leave today. You do not have to leave tomorrow. But please, if you have a person in your life who is safe, a sister, a father, an old friend from college, a neighbor whose porch light is always on, I want you to do one thing this week. I want you to teach a child you love a phone number. Make it a song. Hide a cheap flip phone somewhere a small hand can reach it. Tell that child it is a game and that you are the helper. You do not have to call it what it is. You do not have to admit anything, even to yourself. You just have to give a 5-year-old a way to find a grown-up who loves her on the worst night when you cannot speak. My daughter saved my life with 18 words and a phone number she learned in a song. She did it because a retired state trooper who lost his wife when he was 36 and raised his daughter alone absolutely refused to lose either of us too. She did it because somebody who loved me had built her a door before I knew I was in a room. I'm telling you this story because somebody has to build that door for somebody else. Maybe that somebody is you. Maybe the child you're thinking about right now, the one whose face just floated into your head. Maybe she is the reason you opened this video tonight. Teach her the number. Make it a song. Hide the phone. She will remember. They always remember. And one day, God forbid, she will stand at the top of a staircase with the receiver pressed against both ears, and she will be the bravest person in the room, and everything you taught her will come back to her in the voice of someone who loved her enough to make a plan. That is the whole story. That is what my daughter did for me on a Christmas Eve in Vermont, when she was 5 years old, and the snow was so thick you couldn't see the porch light. That is what a grandfather did for both of us, quietly, for a year, without ever telling me he was doing it. I am still here because of them. You can be still here too. I've thought a lot, in the years since that Christmas Eve, about how I got there in the first place. Not how he got there. He made his own choices, and he is paying for them in a Cinderbrook room 2 hours north of here. I mean how I got there. How I, a grown woman with a job and a father and a college degree, ended up on a kitchen floor in my own house with a broken arm and a 5-year-old at the top of the stairs. The honest answer is that I traded my judgment, piece by piece, for peace. Every time he raised his voice, I made myself smaller, so the room could hold us both. Every time he accused me of something I hadn't done, I apologized for the shape of his suspicion, instead of naming it. I told myself I was being kind. I was being patient. I was being a good wife. What I was actually doing was teaching him slowly and carefully that there was no floor under his behavior. There was no bottom. Every time I shrank, the room he had to be cruel in got a little bigger. That is cause and effect. That is the only law in a house like the one I lived in. What you tolerate, you train. What you excuse, you invite back. I want to be careful here, because I am not blaming the woman I was. She did what she could with what she had. But I am telling you, and I am telling the version of me that still lives somewhere inside my chest, that kindness without a spine is not kindness. It is a slow surrender. Real decency, the kind holds, has bone in it. My father had bone in it. He didn't yell at me to leave. He didn't lecture. He built a door for my daughter to walk through, quietly, for a year, and he waited. That is what wisdom looks like when it loves you. It does not perform. It prepares. And Posy? Posy taught me something I am still learning. She taught me that courage is not the absence of fear, because she was terrified. You could see it in her hands. Courage is doing the thing your grown-up taught you to do, even when the room is loud and the man you love is the one making it loud. She had 18 words and a song, and she used them. She did not freeze. She did not wait for permission. She had been given a tool, and she trusted the person who gave it to her, and she used it. If you take anything from my story, take this. Build the door before you need it. Teach the child. Tell the friend. Write down the number. Decency, the kind with bone in it, is something you practice in small ways on ordinary Tuesdays, so it is already in your hands on the worst night of your life. Strength is not loud. It is rehearsed. And the woman you are quietly becoming, in the small choices nobody sees, is the one who will answer the door when grace finally kicks it in.